Hello, Nathaniel.
Hello, Seb.
I don't know you, Nathaniel, which means that I get not just to have a conversation, but actually to meet someone new.
Yeah, so shall we merge onto the roundabout and get to know a new member of the world?
Let's do that. Yeah, we can do it properly. We can like in a boxing ring, you can go round and round and keep the distance to make sure you're
Yeah.
just out of punching distance.
Well, I enjoyed your conversation with Andrea leading up. That was an interesting conversation. So I'm glad to be here now and to get to know you a bit.
So I read a little bit of your bio, and I mean, like all bios, they're going to be somewhat focused on the parts of our character that we think prospective customers might be interested in. But I mean, collaborative coaching. What actually is your area of interest, and how do you see that improving the future?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So I guess my background as well was in software development. That's where
Mhm.
I got my start. So working as a software developer, yeah, on a team, and then having a leadership role as a Scrum Master, and then getting into agile coaching. And eventually, what I found that I was like most passionate about in that whole umbrella topic was really around the skills that help people work together on teams, things like group process facilitation,
Mhm.
etc. So I've started to branch out beyond just software and working in some different industries, different contexts. And I guess part of what that ideal future for me, what that involves would be that some of the things that I had to learn through the School of Hard Knocks early in my career, that would be more readily available to people and people have higher fluency in that. And then I think also one of the things that is of interest to me is that when we think about groups working together is sort of like how can they have a bigger picture perspective on the impact of what they're making.
Mm. Okay. Well, so I mean, those are two really different directions that we could go down, aren't they? The one
Yeah.
that the one that interests me and has always interested me is this idea about teaching as being a way of short circuiting the hard knocks,
uh,
whereas at the same time you will also promote failure because failure is a great way to learn. And so at one level we're saying, well, we can teach you so you don't fail, and on the other side we're saying, but embrace failure because that's a great way of learning. uh, how do you sort of square off that apparent tension?
um, well, I'm glad you want to go down this path as well, because I saw or I listened rather to a podcast that you did where you were talking about chainsaws and chainsaw safety. And so
Yes.
that's, I think I was really curious to ask you about that. So I'm glad you asked about this dichotomy, because maybe we can explore that if you're open
Yeah,
to it.
cool.
It's a really interesting metaphor or different branch to learn from. um, well, I guess for me they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, I think some of the best learning that I've had in my own experience has been when things did fail or when things did not work out.
Uh-huh.
So from my perspective, I don't see the goal of learning is to save people from all learning that they would have through making mistakes. I mean, that's a huge benefit of making mistakes. I think for me, it would be more that, at least from my experience, not flailing around and trying to generally find the direction to go to increase my learning. So to have better failures and better learning through those failures.
I like that, better failures. Yeah, that's a great way of describing it. um and I think that's something that many customers of training courses fail to grasp, and I'm certainly guilty of not pointing it out to them during the sales process, that this training course doesn't mean you won't have any failures. It just means that you will have more profitable failures. You'll be able to learn more from the failures because you're already working in the area where there's a rich seam of learning to be had. Yeah, and my chainsaw is in the shop.
So how do you see, that's maybe an interesting segue there is, I mean, we're talking about failures, and your failures, I could imagine, I actually don't know how to operate a chainsaw, but I could imagine that there are some rather minor failures you could have working with a chainsaw, but there's also other kinds that would really result in a bad day.
Yes. So there is, I mean, we designed our BDD training course based upon, or at least our training course for trainers. We designed that upon our experience of chainsaw certification courses, certainly in the UK. I don't know what they're like in the US. And in the UK, they run a procedure where you have to go to at least 3 days of training, or three different sections, where they call it see it, do it, nail it. So the first time, you're not touching anything dangerous. You're being shown it. You're being walked through the bits. You're watching someone else demonstrate how you should do it correctly in the incorrect stances. And then second time through, you do the actual activities. You've done some paper-based work, but now you've got a chainsaw, it's running. You're being very closely monitored, and you're being asked to do very prescribed activities. And then when they're confident that you've got that nailed, or got that under your belt, now they move on to a point where they actually certify you, and you have to go out and do it with very little guidance. They're there to stop you if you're about to chop your foot off, but otherwise they let you run through it, and then they mark you. And I guess one thing that I didn't make clear there is that although it's 3 different parts of it, you're not guaranteed to move from one to the next on a single training. So on the do it section, if you're clumsy or you start it in an unsafe way, they may say, well, you've got to do more practice and come back and do this part of the certification again. So it's very safety based. It's really hard to try and implement that in the software world, because in the software world, I don't know about you, but most certification in my experience is more of an advertisement for prospective employers, rather than any validation that I'm any good, or the person who's got the certification is any good. In chainsaw land, you cannot get a job if you don't have that certification. It's just, no one will insure you. And so you just don't go anywhere. And there's been discussions, literally, haven't there? There've been discussions for decades about, what sort of an industry is software? Are we like engineers, where you have to be certified and chartered and generally approved, or are we just craftspeople who can buy a box of tools?
That's a very interesting point. Just to go back to something that you said about the chainsaw certification. So if you fail a section, can they actually send you back? Could you be all the way up to the 3rd step and they say you've done something really incongruent with what you've learned so far, so we'd like you to go back to step 1 even, or it would just be back to
so I'm not an expert in the certification within chainsaw. My understanding is that you just don't proceed. You don't go. It's not like snakes and ladders, but there is no guarantee that you will. There's no guarantee that you will ever get a license. Although, actually, using a chainsaw really isn't that. Really isn't. It's not like jQuery, right? So there's a limited number of things to learn about chainsaw, and some of the ones that you just don't think about. So in a way, it is a bit like jQuery. It's just not as wide, not as broad, and so there are very few people in the world who can't learn to use a chainsaw. Just in the same way, there are very few people in the world who can't eventually learn to drive a car.
Yeah, So to your point about what is software development then? Is it more like a craft? Is it engineering? And within the context of certifying or at least teaching people in a way that I assume part of the intention there is to have some kind of validation for them or through the process that they really understand the concepts that are covered. I mean, where do you fall out on that now?
So I was hoping you were going to answer that question, but I see you've deflected it back. So personally, I think most software certification sucks. It's self-validation. People will use it to proclaim some expertise, quite often expertise that they aspire to but don't have. So, you can go out and become a certified Scrum Master in a day, as long as you're prepared to pay the few $100 it takes to get it. And does that mean you'll be any good at helping a team derive value from Scrum methodology? I haven't seen any evidence of that. There was some, Microsoft do certification around some of their tool sets. That maybe as an employer will give me confidence that you can walk through the UI and plug things together, but will you understand what's going on under the hood? I'm not sure. So I don't rate certification in the industry at the moment. I think probably most college degrees, they're useful indicators that you can learn something, not that you have learned it or that anything that you've learned so far is useful, but really the only way to know if someone is going to fit in is to work with them and to pair with them for an afternoon or invite them into the team for a week. And unfortunately, the way we do employment, they seem to be able to set aside hours and hours for interviews, but to actually bring someone in to do meaningful work for a week to see whether they fit in, that's very rarely the path. Although, I don't know, you were aware of Richard Sheridan, is it? From Menlo Industries, wrote an excellent book a few years ago called Joy Inc. That describes...
Yeah. Go ahead, continue.
So he does, that's how they hire at Menlo. Well, allegedly, I've never participated, but the way they apparently do it is they have open days and then dozens of people come in, they put them into teams, they let them work through exercises for the afternoon or the day, and based upon seeing how you collaborate, they identify the ones that work with other people best, and then offer them a job for a week or a month or something like that. And then they throw away whatever they're doing at the moment and come and work for Menlo, being paid for whatever period of time it is. And at the end of that time period, they either mutually agree to continue, i.e. they get a permanent job, or the relationship ends then and you go off and do something else. Quite adventurous.
It is quite adventurous. If I could propose a little bit of a tack in the conversation, because just as we were talking, one of the things that I was curious about is that's very creative for me that you took inspiration from chainsaws and becoming certified in chainsaws and using that to think about a certification in software. Like what other, because I think one of our questions is sort of a prompt was thinking about other disciplines and helping to imagine the change you want. So I'm just curious, like, how do you get inspiration from other fields, or what other fields are inspiring to you that creatively make you think in your own discipline? Aha, this is another approach.
Oh, well, so a couple of years ago, I took a month off and I spent the time on my own walking across some of the footpaths of France. And I got to thinking about software development as I was following those paths. And actually, there are so many bits about that experience that maybe because I was deprived of so much conversation because I was walking on my own for 10 hours a day, but I saw so many parallels just between, walking through paths, trying to work out where you were, the different technologies that were at your disposal, how camping equipment had changed over the past 25 years, what the similarities between planning a project and planning how you're going to walk between point A and point B in a fixed period of time, even though you don't know the route, you don't know how long it's going to take. The difficulties of estimation, where you know where you've got to get to, but you don't know whether the path is flat or windy, whether it's steep or not, so I guess the answer here is almost anything I can derive an analogy from. The first article that I ever wrote was about building a structure here at my house, which is still up, and I was comparing and contrasting that to software projects. And the first conference talk I ever gave was Object Technology 2003, where I did an analogy between requirements analysis and building straw bale buildings. So I mean, you've asked either the right person or the wrong person, because I see the software development, software architecture just as another facet of life. It's like building, it's like history, it's like art, it's like walking. It's a human activity that has artifacts such as tools. It has interactions with people, and it has end goals.
Yeah, well, and I second you on the walking and coming up with ideas when I do walks. I think there's even been some research about creativity and getting out into nature and walking, but I've had the same experience, like doing the West Highland Way, and all kinds of ideas come to you as you're walking along. So yeah.
So I managed to turn it into a talk as well. So ACU 2017, the video is online. I have to say, because being a narcissist, I rewatched it not that long ago. It's actually not bad as far as impromptu recorded conference talks go. So quite an interesting watch. I even interested myself.
Well done.
Yeah, exactly. So what for you? What are you planning to learn next? How are you going to move? What's your next idea?
Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. What's my next I guess the question would be, would that be in personal life or would that be in professional life? And yeah, because I feel like I'm always trying to learn something new. And you were talking, I think, a little bit about woodworking earlier. And so, for example, during this lockdown time, I've been doing some learning some basics of carpentry around the house here. But I think, yeah, professionally, what is on my plate? I mean, I think one of the things that that I'm really curious about right now is another field that I've been trying to learn from is like the circular economy. I've had some clients in that space. And so I'm really interested in learning more about that, and are there ideas that translate across from that to software development, or vice versa.
So when you say circular economy, can you give us a high level view of what you mean by that?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll do my best. I don't claim to be an expert on it at this point. So, but basically, it's kind of an umbrella term, as like with Agile, for example. But the idea being that I've heard it mostly applied to physical products, and that you're thinking about from basically like from cradle to cradle. So something that you create, a new chair, a computer, whatever. What is the life cycle going to look like that, so that you're minimizing waste, and that you can take that and reincorporate that into something else, so that it's not just going into a refuse pile.
Okay, so I mean, it's almost as if you should have been speaking with Andrea, whose company Corgi Bytes specializes in taking legacy code and making it fit for purpose again, or bringing it back into the land of the living.
Yeah, there is a parallel or a connection. I see there.
That connection.
Yeah. What's next for you in learning?
Well, I am currently working with. I'm back on open source, so I'm looking at a JavaScript library called Cucumber Pretty, which it's a bit nerdy, to be honest. So Cucumber has a number of different outputters, for providing the formatted output. One of them historically has been called the Pretty formatter, because it comes out looking like colored documentation. But a while ago, the maintainers of the JavaScript version of Cucumber decided to drop the Pretty formatter, which then prompted some other project to start up and create a third-party Pretty formatter for the JavaScript Cucumber, and it is currently not working with the latest version of JavaScript Cucumber. And being open source, either somebody does something about it or it stays broken. And I'm trying to do a JavaScript training course for Cucumber users. And so, although I can do the training course without a Pretty formatter, it's much easier if there is one. So I'm getting immersed in some of the vagaries of JavaScript, and necessarily now, because the world is such as it is, TypeScript, neither of which are languages that I've ever commercially programmed in. So
so is that a big endeavor then? It sounds pretty involved, but
I don't think it should be. I think it should be really trivial, but I'm finding it harder than I was hoping. So essentially what's happened is that a whole bundle of data structures have morphed. So the underlying, everything on the top looks the same, the plumbing has changed. And I don't know, have you ever worked on, I mean, you've said you've been doing a bit of carpentry, but have you ever worked on an old house?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you're trying to trace plumbing in an old house, you don't go and look for the plans of the house, because even if you can find the plans, they will not be an accurate representation of how the plumbing actually still lies in your house. And in Cucumber JavaScript, I have to say that the diagrams are pretty absent, and the examples are good as far as they go, but don't go far enough. And so essentially, I'm currently guddling through source code and doing runtime diagnostics to try and work out what is the data structure here. Now, there are some people who have this knowledge, but these people are very busy. And anyway, I'll learn more by guddling on my own, probably.
Yeah, sounds like I haven't done the plumbing adventure yet, but for electrical in old houses, it's also like that. It's like, wait, is this color what? This doesn't. I have to go like Google and see if someone has done in Belgium, like what were the antique colors before 1940 something for positive versus anyway.
So a word to the wise: don't believe the color. Use the voltmeter.
Is that learned through hard knocks or?
Yes. So I was. I mean, all of the problems I have here are my own. So I've been living in this space for 25 years. I've built a few buildings, and we've laid wires and plumbing and cables all over the place. And I had a plumbing problem, and there was a blue alkathene pipe, which water flows through, and I needed to plumb into that and reroute the water. So I was soaring through it, and I suddenly found myself about 6 feet away from where I had been soaring, because in fact that blue pipe had been used as an electrical conduit, not to conduct water. So yeah, I've had that experience. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that worked out okay in the end.
So that's the joy of safety circuit breakers. So certainly in the UK, and I imagine in the US as well, there's a standard component called an RCD, a residual current detector, and as soon as the RCD detects that more current is going down live than going back along neutral, it flips. So basically, as soon as you start earthing it through your body, it goes, something bad is happening here. Let's stop it going, and that's a nice metaphor for some things that you see in software as well. Trying desperately to segue us back into this space that we're at, where there's a wonderful book called Release It, where one of the patterns is the circuit breaker, which again is to try and make sure that if something's going wrong, we don't just keep trying to do that something over and over again and use resources. Instead, what the software does is automatically detect that there's a problem happening, breaks it off there, and gives the system time to recover.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have the same in certification as well.
Maybe we should. A certification breaker.
A certification breaker. Now, I think there is a product idea.
What would that look like?
What would that look like? So there are strange areas here, because there's certification in both vocational and technical aspects. In a technical space, I can see that certification may have some value. In the vocational space, I really can't. So I don't think it's much use to me knowing that a Scrum Master can trot out the definition for the word retrospective. I need to know that a Scrum Master can get on well enough with a team to get information out in a safe way so that it can be acted upon.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think it's useful for every Java developer to know something about how constructors work. There's not so much variation there. So I'd like to see certification breakers in the vocational space. I would like them to go, well, you've certified to a point where you can trot out definitions, but we're not going to actually give you this certification until you've done at least X number of hours in the field and had people say that you were good at it, or you didn't suck, or something like that. I think some gap between demonstrating learned knowledge and then demonstrating actual application of that knowledge would be a really useful separation. And it's one that I think has been used in, for instance, a friend of mine is training to be a nurse, and she's passed all her exams, but she's still got to do 3 months, 6 months, a year before that she'll actually get her nurse's certificate.
Yeah, there's some kind of practical applied, observed applied knowledge or use of the knowledge there. Yeah.
Does that count as a certification breaker? Maybe tenuously.
It's a working concept.
Well, we just made it up, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. I mean, we're at the paper napkin phase of it at this point.
And I don't even have a napkin.
Oh.
I know. There's a great blog post that Matt Wynn and Aslak Helse and Julien Biesman wrote about the Cucumber business plan. And it was, in fact, the business plan was sketched on a napkin in a pub. And they have the actual napkin in the blog post.
Nice. They should frame that.
It may well have been framed. I'm not sure, because we all work remotely, so I don't get to see their trophy cabinet.
Yeah. Well, if my little timer is correct, we're almost at the end of our time together. So I just wanted to honor that and thank you for your time. It's nice getting to know you a bit today. So
yeah, good meeting you, Nathaniel. And I can see that George is waiting in the wings to pop in, and I hope you have a great conversation.
Thanks.
See you later.
See ya.